Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into one of the absolute most audacious maritime escapes in all of human history. We are going to explore the incredible story of how Napoleon Bonaparte literally slipped right through a massive naval blockade to steal back an entire empire. Okay, let's dive into this.
Think about it for a second. How do you steal back an empire from right under the nose of the British Royal Navy? I mean, it sounds like an impossible heist movie, right? But it actually happened. We so often read about history as just this dry list of inevitable facts, but what we're looking at today is a high-stakes, seemingly impossible maritime heist. It's a story packed with camouflage, extreme tension, and frankly, one unbelievable bluff.
Section 1. The Timber Prison, Confining an Emperor.
So to truly appreciate the sheer magnitude of this escape, we first have to understand the grim reality of this prison in early 1815. 86. That was the total square mileage of Napoleon's new reality. A guy who was once the undisputed master of Europe was now the sovereign of this microscopic kingdom on the Mediterranean island of Elba. You can just imagine the extreme claustrophobia for a man used to ruling an entire continent. He was, practically speaking, a caged lion.
And while Napoleon was officially allowed a small personal guard and a tiny navy, make no mistake, Elba was an absolute fortress. But his cell wasn't made of stone. The true bars of his cell were made of timber, canvas, and iron. Those were the materials making up the heavily armed warships of the British Royal Navy and the French Royalist fleet. They constantly and relentlessly patrolled the surrounding Ligurian Sea, keeping him completely boxed in.
And you couldn't just, casually slip through this unnoticed in the dark. Get this, every single British captain in the Mediterranean actually had a portrait of the deposed emperor right in their cabin. Their strict orders were to ensure he could be instantly identified if they intercepted him on the high seas. To escape this setup, you didn't just need speed, you needed masterful deception to outmaneuver a highly sophisticated maritime net.
Which brings us to Section 2, the perfect window, planning the breakout.
Breaking out of an impenetrable naval fortress obviously requires meticulous preparation. And this brilliantly illustrates the genius of Napoleon's tactical mind. He set his sights on his fastest vessel, which is a two-masted brig named the Inconstant. But speed alone wasn't going to cut it here. First, he had extra cannons mounted on her deck to vastly improve her chances of surviving a direct naval encounter. Second, and this is crucial, he ordered her hull repainted in the exact colors typically used by British warships. It was just a brilliant piece of maritime camouflage designed to completely confuse distant spotters.
But this entire operation hinged on one thing: timing. Sir Neil Campbell, the British commissioner assigned to keep a watchful eye on Napoleon, routinely patrolled the waters. But in late February, Campbell sailed over to Livorno on the Italian mainland. This created a brief, highly precarious window of opportunity, and Napoleon acted instantly. He locked down Elba, meaning 0 ships were allowed to leave, ensuring absolutely no word of his mobilization could reach the mainland. On the evening of February 26, 1815, he boarded the Inconstant with about 400 grenadiers. They sailed out on a strong southerly breeze, aiming for a rapid strike. But by the very next day, disaster struck.
The wind just completely died. Imagine the agonizing silence on that ship. For a sailing vessel trying to run a massive naval blockade, a lack of wind is basically an absolute death sentence. The small flotilla found itself almost entirely becalmed. For hours, they drifted at a painfully slow pace. They were highly visible on the open water, totally vulnerable to any patrolling frigate that might catch a localized breeze and swoop right in on them.
Section 3. The Ultimate Bluff, Face to Face with the Zephyr. The winds finally began to pick up on February 27th. But with the wind came their absolute worst-case scenario. Enter the Zephyr. This was a heavily armed French Royalist warship commanded by a Captain Andrier. The Zephyr spotted Napoleon's camouflage flotilla and immediately began closing the distance. The very threat they had spent weeks preparing for was now bearing down right on top of them.
The tension on the deck of the Inconstant must have been absolutely suffocating. Just imagine being one of those soldiers, lying in wait. Knowing they couldn't outrun the warship at this close range, Napoleon ordered his men to prepare a deadly ambush. His 400 hidden grenadiers were given strict orders. Take off your tall bearskin caps so your silhouettes aren't seen over the rails, lie completely flat on the wooden deck, and keep your muskets loaded and ready. They were literally bracing for a brutal, close-quarters fight to the death. As the Zephyr came within hailing distance, Captain Andrew picked up his megaphone and shouted across the waves. He asked, "Where are you headed?"
The captain of the Inconstant played it cool, shouting back that they were bound for Genoa. But then, Andrew asked the question that made every single hidden, sweating soldier on the brig hold their breath. He asked, "How is the Emperor?"
And according to the incredible legend of this event, Napoleon doesn't hide, he doesn't cower. In a move of sheer, almost comical audacity, he grabs the speaking trumpet himself, shouting back across the rolling waves directly to the ship actively hunting him. He replied, "The Emperor is in excellent health." No way, right? It was a brazen, magnificent bluff. Satisfied with the answer and completely unaware that he had just spoken face-to-face with the most wanted man in all of Europe, Captain Andrew actually ordered the Zephyr to sail on.
Moving to our final section, the 100 days begin from prisoner to emperor.
So the crucial point here is that this single, successful bluff didn't just save Napoleon's life in that moment. It completely rewrote the trajectory of European history. When he landed at Gulf One on the southern coast of France on March 1st, he had roughly 1,000 men. But by the time he marched into Paris just 3 weeks later, he commanded a massive army. Why? Because the royalist troops that were sent to intercept him continually defected the very moment they saw him. The snowball effect of his return was immediate and totally explosive. The result of all this momentum was the famous 100 days of his restored empire, an empire that would only finally be extinguished on the bloody fields of Waterloo. It's honestly stunning to realize the monumental historical consequence born from a single escape, proving the immense, world-altering stakes of outmaneuvering that naval choke point on the Ligurian Sea.
So what does this all mean? Well, it leaves us asking, how might history have been rewritten if just one gust of wind had changed? Or if Captain Andrieux had asked one slightly different question? It really highlights the incredibly fragile nature of history. What we so often see as grand, inevitable historical eras sometimes hinge on a freshly painted hull, a sudden drop in the wind, and a boldly shouted bluff across the waves. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and remember to always look for the fascinating details hidden in the broad strokes of history.